Good evening, IGTV, and welcome to Thursdays with Toni.
And Trish.
For tonight's episode, we will be talking something in relation to the last episode about career talks. So, for tonight, we will be sharing some insights on what to do and what not to do in different aspects of your career. So, our first will be interviews. And as you know, Trish has been a recruiter previously. And I think it's just right that she shares what an applicant should do and not do. Trish?
First advice is, of course, to know the dress code. Even if it's virtual or actual interview, I think it is important for you to show your professional self at all times, especially when you are speaking with an HR. So know the dress code. If you're unsure, you wear smart casual. Of course, you have to be early, regardless of the setting. It is important to check your internet connection if you're going virtual. If it's actual interview, be 15 minutes early so you still have time to check yourself, to go to the restroom and touch up if needed, and have your documents with you. I think it's important that you bring a copy of your resume and a valid ID in case they ask for security purposes as well. And what you shouldn't do is, of course, be late or being late without informing your interviewer about it right away. And of course, the job offers, once you already passed the interview, then congratulations. But of course, you have to take note that you have to read the contract properly because you don't want to sign something that you don't understand. So if there are some information that are not clear to you, ask the HR to be sure. And if there are still information that unclear to you, you actually still ask about it. You clarify it because at the end of the day, ikaw yung lugi if ever you don't understand the thing. And of course, they can go back to what you've signed. And also, what you shouldn't do is to just sign it and go. We do not like our candidates leaving without understanding the contract and return to us saying that this part was not explained properly. So I think it's important that you have to be assertive in terms of asking questions. Never ever be shy because it's your right to ask the things that you don't understand in a legal paper. So, Tony, in your first few weeks of your company, of course, you had an adjusting period, but can you please share to us the do's and don'ts during your first few weeks in the company?
I think the first thing that a new joiner in an organization should do is to focus on really getting to know people, especially those that you will be closely working with or your teammates, to be more specific. You should maximize your first few days and first few weeks of knowing the culture of the team, being observant of how things are done in your team, especially so that you can also ask questions if some practices or behaviors of the team are questionable for you, so that you understand the reasons or the reasons behind the whys of why they are doing or behaving in a certain way. Aside from that, I think it's also very important to always ask questions. And this is something that I always tell our new joiners. Never be shy in asking literally any type of question, whether it's related to the processes that your team has or, just something that you are curious about. Because we wouldn't want you lasting in the job without knowing things that you should actually be aware of. And when it comes to the don'ts, I think when you're still new to the organization or a team, don't how would I say it? Don't just do things just because you're already comfortable, like after a few days or a few weeks. You should always be sensitive and know that some things may not sit well with others, and you should not just, you shouldn't just stick to that. If you make someone feel uncomfortable, then don't just be silent about it. Talk to the person so that you will clear any bad air that you have. Okay, so Trish, when someone is new to the organization, one of the things that they actually go through trainings and learning sessions. Can you share some tips on that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when it comes to training, I know it can be boring to some of, well, that includes me. So I find it boring, but I must be intentional in order for me not to take training for granted. I think most people take that for granted because they see that it is just a requirement from a company. But you are there for a reason, and that is to learn and upgrade yourself in order to be effective and competitive in your job. And who knows, this type of trainings can help you be marketable in the future. And what you shouldn't do in the training is, of course, not to listen. Trainings, especially in companies, are free, so never take that for granted because it's something that you can use in the future and, of course, in your present job. What about you, Tony? In terms of meeting within and outside the team, what are your do's and don'ts?
Actually, I think it's somewhat holistic when we talk about trainings, learning sessions, and meetings because they have something in common. You're gonna be in a room, whether it's virtual or actual, with different individuals. So my do's would be do come prepared, especially if a training, a meeting, or a learning session is pre-planned. Even if it's
Mm-hmm.
virtual, do come on time. It's a way for you to show that you respect other people's times, especially if you
Mm-hmm.
want your time to be respected. Do take down notes, especially if you know that the content of the meeting, the training, or the learning session will be too much because we wouldn't, people will not expect you to grasp everything in one setting, especially if it's technical. So also do ask questions if at any point there are things that are not clear to you, or reserve it during the question and answer portion of the session. The don'ts
Yeah.
would be when we say that we are listening, we actually should mean it. So don't don't ask questions or don't speak if someone is not yet finished with what they're saying. Common courtesy, of course. Don't be shy in asking questions, even if you think that the question has already been asked, because we all have our different learning curves. Even if someone already understood what the point being shared is, it can be natural that you're not yet able to comprehend that, and that's okay. So don't be shy. I think those are my major tips for the meetings. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
hmm
And what about in building relationship with stakeholders? What are your do's and don'ts to this?
I can recall when I became a part of the U.S. Team. So we were closely working with U.S. recruiters then, and although of course it's a virtual working relationship, what my colleague and I initially thought of was to actually set up a GTKY, or a get to know you session, where we came in prepared with a one slider of things about us, because we recognized that even if most of our interactions with our US recruiters will be strictly work related, it also has an impact when your stakeholders or people you work with know something a bit personal about you, because they will be able to gauge on how they can better interact with you, how can they can better converse with you. And it actually was proven effective because the working relationship became smoother. The don't is not setting up a GTKY, I'd say, because I've also experienced where a certain stakeholder was not around when we set up that GTKY. And when we started working, there were some there was somewhat, I guess, miscommunication, or a disconnect. But although it's kind of late, it's still okay to set up a GTKY even if you're already working with a person for some time, because it can eventually clarify the gray areas in your working relationship. Also, probably another don't in when you try to build relationship with your stakeholders, don't be insensitive, because especially if you're working in a global organization, you will encounter different cultures, a very diverse workforce, and you should practice um, observing, how a specific stakeholder wants to be interacted with. So something like that. Yep.
Mm-hmm. Okay, this time actually I wanted to ask you this because for me, my line manager is in the US and I find
hmm
it sometimes difficult to communicate with him. So, what about you, Tony? What is your piece of advice or your do's and don'ts when it comes to building relationship with with your line manager?
okay. Actually, this is something I am passionate about because one of my motivators is supervisory support. So lucky for my current organization that we have frequent connects with our line managers. So it's a monthly connect, and we talk about anything under the sun, starting off with performance, some feedback from stakeholders or peers, and something about your personal life because we also want to check in on each other. But if you're in an organization that does not have that culture, I'd say do become the proactive one. Do initiate connects with your line manager. And it's not just for you to be asking about how you're doing if you're satisfying the things that are expected of you, but it's also you actually getting to know the person you're working with, even if it's this is someone higher than you.
Mm.
Because even if people are not expected or required to be friends at work, having a harmonious relationship with the people that you work with will eventually help you in the long run. The don'ts probably, even if your line manager is someone who is very open and very friendly to staff, don't be super duper comfortable, especially if you're interacting with your line
Mm-mm.
manager, especially if it's outside of work. Especially if it's inside work, because even if you have that like friendly relationship with your line manager, you can exchange a few jokes here and there. But you should always remember that this individual is still your superior, and you just need to give the common courtesy that the individual deserves.
That's
Hmm.
great. Actually, that's quite insightful. Yes, never be comfortable, especially in the professional world. I think it's good that you have a relationship, but going beyond that to be so comfortable, I think
Yeah.
it's not healthy anymore.
Hmm. Yeah, Trish, I'm curious. I know in someone's professional life, we will encounter feedback. It's something that we cannot avoid, and it can be formal or informal. Formal through the performance evaluation from your leaders, and informal, when your peers or your stakeholders share their feedback to your line manager, and your line manager tells it to you. So I'm curious, what can you share about some do's and don'ts when you give feedback or when you're actually handling a difficult stakeholder or colleague?
Colleagues. Well, in terms of handling feedback, I'm very objective about it, even though sometimes it seems distasteful. Though I haven't personally encountered some distasteful feedback, but I think one of the key points here is how you will react. Don't ever take it negatively. Just take the good from the bad. Just check if you will learn something from that criticism. And if ever it seems distasteful to you, never ever show that you are offended. You just keep quiet about it. And if ever really it bothers you, if it's some sort of racist comment or discriminative comment, I think you must bring that up to your supervisor or your manager. But if it's just a general negative comment, avoid being too negative about it. Just be professional and handle it objectively. In terms of handling difficult colleagues, you must ask yourself first, why am I finding him or her difficult to work with? I think it's best to try to sort it out for yourself. Baka kasi di mo lang siya gusto because he or she reminds you of someone you hate, or you just had a wrong impression of that person. And personally, I really don't bother myself too much because I totally understand that you will really meet someone difficult to work with in your career life. But if this is already affecting the team's performance um, uh, or progress, I probably bring it up to my supervisor or manager during one-on-one. I don't want to do it publicly, especially
Yeah.
with a team meeting. I think it's not good. And of course, never ever fight, or wag ka makikipag-away na parang you're in a market or something that.
You somewhat touched on this. Do be objective. I know sometimes it can be easy to be subjective, especially if the individual is someone that you don't really click with. But do do focus on the fact that you're giving feedback is because you are concerned about the individual's character development. I think character development is often the concern whenever we give feedback. Um, in handling difficult stakeholders or colleagues naman, I'd say do take time, especially if this difficult stakeholder is someone who would write strong emails, and if you're someone a bit sensitive or emotional, do take time before responding. Because if you respond and you're also emotional, then you're just putting yourself in the same headspace as that difficult stakeholder. And we don't want that because it's better if we try to be the bigger person as much as we can. So,
Yeah.
don't reply when you know that you're emotional. Don't force yourself to, just for the sake of a timely reply, reply immediately. If you know that it's something that you should sleep on before responding, then please do so. It has been proven effective. Think about it over the weekend, and probably when you reread that email or note on a different week, you have like a different perspective, or like, it didn't really sound that strong. Anyway, okay, so last point for tonight, I think. So we tackled a bit about different milestones when it comes to career. But the last would probably be whenever we leave an organization to pursue opportunities in other companies. So, Trish, what would be your tips?
Mm-hmm. Well, in terms of leaving in an organization, of course, you write a professional resignation letter. Hindi yung sasabihin mo lang na, "Ah, okay, I'm leaving. I don't want this company anymore." I think it's best that you file that resignation letter at least 30 days before you render. I think it's important that you properly turn over your task to your colleague or to someone who will replace you. Make sure that that person knows the basics of the job that you will be leaving. And what you must not do is to badmouth the company and leave without, of course, notifying your company. Just one day you'll be gone and something like that. Because a lot of people I know, especially in the BPO industry, do that all the time, or most of the time. They just leave whenever there's a new offer to another company, and I think it's not good. Especially, we have a small world here in Manila. HRs usually are friends to different companies, and it's easy to ask, especially when you search them on Facebook. Ah, okay, we have this common friend, so I must ask this HR since that was his or her current employer. No, it's easy, especially word of mouth, to have that information, and it can actually sabotage your career. So never take that for granted. Be professional at all times, even if it's difficult to do it, because at the end of the day, it's still you who will benefit that.
Good points. And I wanted to build on some things that you already shared. So, personally, I'd say the do's here is to give a heads up to your line manager, especially if you have a good working relationship with your line manager, because line managers don't like that kind of surprise that, hey, I'm leaving, especially if the line manager is very fond of you, right? Even before giving the actual resignation letter, if you're already in that position where you know that the next step is to go external, and you're already like in the assessment stage and things are looking good, do inform your line manager immediately. And like what Trish has shared, do make a professional resignation letter and follow your company's policy, whether it's a 30-day notice, a 60-day notice, because it, I mean, whether you will be leaving the company with bad blood, that's like courtesy to them to allow them to find someone who will replace you. Also, when you leave an organization and you're already handing over your responsibilities to someone new, do extend your patience, because remember that you were once a new joiner who needed the patience of people who are teaching you.
Mm,
So
yes.
do be patient. Do respect the time of the person that you will be training. So if you were the one who set up the training session, do come on time and do finish on time, so that you can maximize and become productive during that slot for the handover. The don'ts would be, of course, aside from bad mouthing the organization, don't, if you can, don't leave any unresolved conflicts, I'd say, because as Trish said, it's a small world, especially in Metro Manila. You'll never know when you'll bump into a colleague, and probably you'll have some opportunities from that colleague. So, if we can try to resolve some small issues that you've had, then do that. And probably don't forget to thank personally the individuals who contributed a lot to your development when you were still in the organization. Yep. I think this has been a very fruitful
Yes.
exchange. I like it, and I hope that our viewers also learned a lot from tonight's session. Any last words or key takeaways, Trish, before we close the session?
Mm-hmm. The most important thing that you do in your career is whatever you do, whatever task that is, decide to choose and take it seriously and do your best.
Very
What
well
about you?
said. Very well said. For me, probably don't don't be pressured with whatever is happening in the careers of people your age. Do know that you have your own time, your own time zone, and I'm pretty sure that if you're very determined to reach that goal, you will definitely achieve it. Again, thank you very much for listening and watching this episode. This has been Thursdays with Tony.
And Trish, thank you guys.
Bye.
Bye.
Take care.
Thursdays with Tony
And Trish.